First, the U.S. president caught COVID, then he was hospitalized, and then he went for a car ride. Donald Trump says he's learned a lot about COVID over the past days. We'll ask our panel about it and whether his illness will once and for all end the argument over social distancing. The U.S. president had made flouting the science political, part of the culture war with out-of-touch elites, as he framed it. Last week, he poked fun at the Democratic rival for president, Joe Biden, for wearing a mask. Will the dramatic twist in the home stretch of a U.S. campaign unlike any other change attitudes and save the lives of those who might be a little more careful? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the impact of a U.S. president who has caught COVID-19. Joining us from Cerritos, New Mexico, Lyndon Haviland, distinguished scholar at the City University of New York's School of Public Health. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
From Phoenix, Arizona, we welcome back Republican strategist Dan Hazelwood, president of Targeted Creative Communications. How are you?
Doing great, thank you.
Former U.S. diplomat Jeffrey Hawkins is a professor at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
And we're joined from Washington, D.C. by France 24 correspondent Ketevan Gorgestani, who better take your vitamins, Ketevan. It's a marathon, not a sprint, this election. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. More than ever, the United States finds itself in uncharted territory with an incumbent president in hospital 4 weeks before Election Day.
So it's been a very interesting journey. I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the book school. And I get it, and I understand it. And it's a very interesting thing, and I'm going to be letting you know about it. In the meantime, we love the USA, and we love what's happening. Thank you.
That statement was put out over social media before that limo ride. A short trip Sunday around the block at Walter Reed Military Medical Center outside of Washington. This trip happening despite the government's own public health guidelines, which require patients to isolate while they're in treatment and still shedding virus. The White House denies it endangered his Secret Service protection. Nonetheless, Ketevan Gorgestani, the critics have not been kind to Donald Trump.
No, and they were jumping on his comments saying that he had learned a lot about COVID-19, and a lot of his critics said that that joyride, as it's been dubbed, proved that he hadn't learned a lot about COVID-19. He mentioned putting in danger the two members of the Secret Service, but also flouting those CDC guidelines, breaking isolation, breaking his quarantine. You imagine the amount of people that were involved in that ride just to wave at supporters. But it gives you an idea of how important it seems to be for the president to show that he is still there, that he's not simply in the hospital, weak and unable to do his duties. He wanted to show that he was doing fine, that he was still around. And it sort of echoes what we've been hearing for the past few days, even from the doctor who acknowledged that he was trying to be upbeat and to paint a rosy picture about the health status of the president. So it all goes together with the fact that everyone in Trump's campaign team and around the White House is trying to paint a rosy picture and pushing and saying that they are all hoping that Donald Trump returns to the White House this Monday.
And he may return to the White House, Ketevan, but we're getting news of his press secretary testing positive, the Bloomberg News Agency claiming there may be more mid-level staff inside the West Wing who've also tested positive. How is the White House functioning these days?
Well, there is a big question about how those people, those staffers in the White House have been, first of all, informed about what was going on and how they're dealing with it right now. Because Kelly McEnany, in her statement about her positive test, said that she didn't know on Thursday when she gave a press briefing at the White House, she didn't know that Hope Hicks had tested positive, even though she had been in contact with her. And so Kelly McEnany went in that press briefing room with several reporters who were part of that White House correspondents pool and possibly put those reporters in danger. So the question is, how well is the White House communicating with its own staff? We're now hearing that the White House sent an email to some of the staffers saying that they should go out and seek their own healthcare providers to try to get tested and possibly quarantined. So it seems like the White House is really grasping and trying to figure out how to keep functioning while dealing with all these people quarantining, not being able to come into the White House, and if Donald Trump returns to the White House, how they're going to deal with that.
Jeffrey Hawkins, when the President of the United States falls ill, the whole world pays attention.
Sure.
Is there a national security problem in the U.S. with all these people falling sick?
Well, I mean, as long as there's continuity of government, there's not a problem. And a lot of people in the U.S. government have thought long and hard about what do we do if the president's sick? What's the line of succession? And that's all set out pretty clearly, set out by law. There are many people at the White House that can backstop for other people, so that's fine. I think the issue is more one of confidence rather than are there the people there to do the job. Of course there are, and the U.S. government is going to continue to operate as it always has. But if there's all this doubt, if people don't know if the president's well or on the mend, or if he's not doing so good, if he hasn't transferred his powers to Vice President Pence, if it's not clear what's going to happen in the days and even weeks ahead. All this in the context of a very fraught election and a lot of distractions and concerns about, Russian interference in election and all the rest. Whether it's domestically or internationally, that does lead to a bit of concern on the part of all Americans, of course, but also on the parts of both the friends and the enemies of the United States.
Dan Hazelwood, was that limousine ride Sunday a good idea?
Well, the president clearly thought it was, and going to the previous speaker of sort of how the perception of the White House, as we all know, this president has very particular ideas of how he wants to be portrayed, and this is his way of trying to answer those questions. So he went out there, and that was his version of trying to do that, along with the various Twitter communications and videos that he's released. That's what he's out there trying to say. See, I can function. That's part of his message that he thinks it's important to deliver right now.
Is it a message? It's a message being delivered for whom? To energize those who will vote for him, or is it for all of the United States, for the whole world?
Well, we all take it differently depending on our own point of view. I think the president probably has two perspectives. One is the political campaign, of course, which is, in the minds of all the American public right now, and then his notions of continuity of government. It is pretty uncommon for the president of the United States, whether it's this one or any of the previous ones, to even temporarily transfer power to anybody else. He clearly doesn't want to be doing that in the middle of an election campaign. So he's trying to deliver the continuity of government message. And he's also trying to make sure his supporters are out there and that their morale is up. That's clearly a big part of this political contest.
Lyndon Haviland, your thoughts when you saw that story about the limousine ride, again, out of the gates of Walter Reed Hospital and then back in again?
My first thought was it flies in the face of everything public health professionals would recommend. It's very clear that you need to self-quarantine, that he is shedding the virus, that he is unnecessarily putting people at risk. And so for me, I understood completely that he wanted to demonstrate continuity of government, demonstrate that he was strong. But from a public health point of view, it was taking unnecessary risks for people. And all of the science tells us that.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the president already knew he had tested positive a first time when he called in to Fox News on the telephone on Thursday. The story says how Trump told an aide to keep the results quiet until a second test came back positive. Is that okay, Lyndon Haviland? Should he have spoken out then, or was he right to wait until he gets the second test?
We all know that testing has been an issue in the United States. There a certain number of tests give false negatives, false positives. So I understand his desire to want to make sure that he was indeed positive, but I think the public health recommendations are quite clear. When you have been exposed to someone who's positive, such as Hope Hicks, that you should immediately begin social distancing and self-quarantining until you can ascertain yourself what your status is. So that's and it's very important right now that the American public be able to trust what our government is saying about the pandemic. We are in uncharted territory. This is the largest public health crisis we've had in over a century. And so trust in government is really critical, and trust in the science. Public health has very clear messages. Self-quarantine if you have been exposed, get tested, wear a facial covering, and wash your hands, and allow contact tracing to do their work. None of these things are being really done nationally, and that's why we find ourselves in such a place of crisis.
Dan Hazelwood, in that same Wall Street Journal article, it quotes one administration official as saying, "I'm glued to Twitter and TV because I have no official communication from anyone in the West Wing of the White House." Again, it brings me back to that national security question I put to Jeffrey Hawkins. It sounds like there's a bit of chaos inside the White House.
Well, this president in particular, always has his own style of communications, but who that official is and where they rank in the schemes of things is pretty critical to whether that matters. The National Security Advisor, I'm sure, has immediate access to the president for whatever purposes they need. So the key functions of government, I am confident. That's why there's been the pictures of the presidential hospital suite at Walter Reed. It's a pretty advanced facility. It's not just this president. The United States has been preparing for presidents in inconvenient locations to be able to get in touch with who they need to. Does it matter that a person who maybe is interested in national parks or some area that's not a critical braking area being able to get in touch with the president right now? No. But I'm confident that the foreign policy, economic policy, national security apparatus.
I think the quote isn't really about whether or not that person can get in touch with the president. I think it's more, should we all be getting tested? There's reports throughout the press that there's a sort of an anti-social distancing culture inside of the White House. It sounds like there's a measure of fear.
Well, I don't know if it's a measure of fear. I think there's, whenever you get exposed to, whenever you're around anybody, we've all heard friends that have gotten this, and our immediate question is, who have you been near? Even if you're talking to a loved one over the phone, who have you been near? All those sort of normal reactions. And the guidance of the White House I haven't read anything, so I can't speak to it, of what you should get tested, who you should let know. That's all important. But we all kind of know. All our viewers know what the answers are as well, as exactly what you said: social distance, quarantine. There was a report that the White House said that if you feel sick or you feel like you shouldn't come in, don't come in to the White House compound, even if you're a full-time employee there. So they've sent some of these signals. It's not surprising that it's not crystal clear to some people, but how that information gets distributed, we don't have those documents.
All right, there's no proof that a September 26th Rose Garden ceremony to welcome Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett was the super spreader event that not only felled the president, but several top aides, at least 2, if not 3 U.S. senators. It's not the first time, though, that the whole world's watched White House hugging and backslapping with alarm. Among those, by the way, in hospital, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who helped prepare then for the last Tuesday's presidential debate with Joe Biden, sitting with Donald Trump. Ketevan Gorjestani, at the White House these days, What's it like?
Well, first of all, it's very hard, especially for us reporters, to get into the White House because they've actually, it's not the White House itself, but the White House Correspondents Association, who has taken steps in order to limit the risks for all the reporters. So they've really brought it down to a core group of reporters, those with the hard passes, those who are part of the pool rotation. They are allowed to go into the press briefing room. For the rest of us, they're telling us, please do not come in unless you absolutely have to. Now, the last time I was physically at the White House was during the signing ceremony for the Abraham Accords. That was about 3 weeks ago. It was mid-September. And back then, there were hundreds of people, about 200 guests, about 200 reporters covering the event. And there again, you had these images of people sitting very close to each other, a lot of them not wearing masks, a lot of handshaking, a lot of hugging. And you saw the same images at that ceremony in the Rose Garden for the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett. And then you had the event in Cleveland this past week, the debate, of course, where you have reports from the few reporters who were actually inside the venue who reported that especially some members of the first family were offered masks when they were sitting in the audience by the local organizers at the Cleveland Clinic, and that they simply waved them away and did not want to wear a mask during that debate. They were socially distanced, the seats were separated, but that was also seemed to have promoted a little bit the spread of that COVID-19, because there are a few staffers of the White House who were not at the ceremony in the Rose Garden, but who were in Cleveland, and they believe that maybe they were infected there.
All right, we're going to pick up on that when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at U.S. presidential election that is less than 1 month away. I say less than 1 month. Some places they have early voting, so it's already begun. And you have a president who, for the fourth day running, is battling COVID-19. We're talking about it with Lyndon Haviland, a distinguished scholar at the City University of New York's School of Public Health, who joins us from Cerrillos, New Mexico. One state over from Phoenix, Republican strategist Dan Hazelwood, who is president of Targeted Creative Communications, former U.S. diplomat Jeffrey Hawkins, who teaches at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po, and France 24 Washington correspondent Kedevan Gorjestani. Jeffrey, this White House that Kedevan Gorjestani described just before the break, where you kind of wear it on your sleeve, whether or not you're for or against social distancing. Do you find yourself having to explain that to French people?
Absolutely. I mean, nobody likes to wear a mask, of course, including French people. But what's at stake here is bigger than all of that. And we've seen that all along. I mean, obviously, the president has made a political decision straight from the start of the epidemic that he was going to downplay it, that he was going to emphasize the importance of returning to work. He mocked his opponent, as you mentioned, for wearing a mask, and has done that consistently. The White House itself hasn't taken the steps that it needed to take to protect people within the White House beyond testing regularly, which is great. It helps, but it's not sufficient. And it appears now that the chickens are really coming home to roost for the president in a number of different ways. I mean, one, he's personally ill, and like most Americans, all Americans, I hope, I wish him well. I hope that he recovers. But he really did put himself at risk.
Is it a turning point for public health?
I think so. Not only for public health, but politically, and you know, we're very interested in the public health aspects, but the political aspects are extremely important as well. He's put members of his staff at risk, and whatever your political views or wherever you come down on how strong the measures should be against COVID, having your campaign manager, your spokesperson, your advisor for the debate, multiple other members of your team, your first lady, all come down with COVID at the same time, just weeks short of an election, is not good strategy. Beyond that, the wider, the meta-political...
And if they recover, they say, oh, we beat it. We beat.
I don't think that's going to be convincing. Although I do understand that President Trump is already having a medal minted that says he's the guy that beat COVID, which I think may be premature, but we'll see how that goes. But anyway, politically, he's got a real problem now. I mean, the one issue where people think that Biden is way ahead of him is on handling COVID, and this just demonstrates that so clearly. And as we go into this key vote, the president is losing support, particularly among older people who are, obviously quite vulnerable to COVID. He's losing support there in a moment where people are already, confused and worried about the disease. Many people reacting poorly to his debate performance. Here we have this president who sort of wantonly puts his own staff, puts other people, puts his own political donors at risk, and then wants to convince the nation that he's the person to handle this crisis that we're facing. That's going to be a tough sell on November 3rd.
Dan Hazelwood, do you agree?
I understand the point, but no, I would sort of remind everybody to look back a little bit. You say 30 days like that's soon. I mean, do you realize it was a week ago when President Trump's tax returns became public? The world has changed 7 times since then. The one thing we know about how this president has reacted in public opinion is that whenever any other shock to the political structure that would knock down all the rest of us, a week later, his numbers are back to where they were. So I would just sort of caution people to not keep projecting that this is going to continue. I understand the argument. I made the argument 4 years ago and was wrong several times. So I'd be very cautious that, this time it's different. This time, the 795th time is going to be different. Is it? We have Wednesday, we have the vice presidential debate. At some point, probably the president's going to be discharged and through the COVID regime recovering, probably. We have another presidential debate on October 15th, and gosh knows what else is going to occur in the next 30 days. It's, one thing that Trump has proven again and again, and our politics are this way right now, is this is a hurricane that surges in direction after direction. And anybody who says, I can tell you with certainty what's going to happen 10 days from now, is sort of defying the history of the last 4 years.
All right, well, I want to get back to that point because as we heard from Jeffrey, there's 2 parts to this. One is the politics part with the campaign, and the other is the public health part. So let me put the question to you, Lyndon Haviland. Is this a seminal moment for all those skeptics who don't really think that wearing a mask is all that important and social distancing? Will this convince them?
Well, I think nothing will convince some people. The reality is that this is absolutely a teachable moment. This is a moment where people who think COVID is a hoax are having to confront that the number one standard bearer for cautious optimism in the president, that he is now positive. And as your other participants have noted, his campaign manager, other people all around him, because of flouting of what is good public health guidance. I think for President Trump's base, there are very few public health facts that would matter. But for swing voters and for independents and for people who are afraid of this virus, they are now going to take a second look at what are their own behaviors? What are we doing about social distancing? Are you wearing a mask? I think Americans are bored of COVID. We're tired of staying home. We're tired. And we want it to go back to the old normal. That's not happening anytime soon. I think President Trump's diagnosis is a clear sign that the virus is not done with us. and that we need to take it more seriously. I do agree that 30 days is an eternity, but early voting is starting. And I think you will see people vote with their concerns about the future, because we vote with our hearts and with our hope. And our hope is that we will get through this virus.
All right, let me ask you then, because you mentioned those who believe COVID is a hoax. You have a pandemic taking place in the age of social media, when such messages can be easily amplified. And by the way, Lyndon, I've heard people on the left say, oh, Donald Trump falling ill is a hoax. It's part of his campaign strategy. How do you talk about science in a time when people on both sides seems to believe in hoaxes?
Well, the first thing I would say is a recent New York Times article demonstrated that the #1 purveyor of false information about COVID has been the president. So it is a troubling moment where we need to be able to put place our trust in government, the head of the CDC, Dr. Fauci. We would love for them to speak with one voice and tell us what we can do. And I think it's a really important point that for years we have been putting science to the side, and we haven't taken public health seriously. I think this is a moment where we now understand that taking public health seriously is a national security issue, and it is an economic issue. It's not. I know many people who say to me, I don't know anyone who's gotten COVID. Well, I think just as when Magic Johnson got HIV, I think the president getting COVID really helps us say, it can happen to anyone, and we need to take it seriously.
And let me just ask you about his treatment as described by his personal physician. A high dose of an experimental antibody treatment, a 5-day course of an antiviral drug that's injected intravenously once a day, steroids. The Associated Press talking about this being a kitchen sink approach, a phenomenon known in medicine as VIP syndrome. What's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is like many people's reactions. We want the president to get healthy and well, and he has access to the best and the brightest minds in public health and medicine. He is also someone who has demonstrated time and time again that he's very opinionated about both public health and medicine and what he wants. I don't think we have full information about everything, either his physical condition or his medical care, and I don't think we will have that for some time. I would love to see Frank reporting about this, but I don't believe that is going to be forthcoming anytime soon.
It never has been, Jeffrey Hawkins. By the way, neither in the United States or in France, we have a proud and long history of presidents lying about their medical record.
And obviously from presidents like FDR, who when he was elected in 1944, was apparently already knew he was dying. Kennedy, lots of presidents have medical conditions that they didn't want the public to know about. But you said we're in the social media age where everyone's worried about hoax. We're also in the social media age where everyone knows everything that's going on, and things come out very quickly. And the fate, it's no exaggeration to say the fate of American democracy, the fate of the free world, could hang on the president's health. So I think. We don't need to know every detail, but we need to know, generally speaking, how it's going. And it seems pretty clear that the president is interested in putting out one message, and I guess I don't blame him, but we do need to know what his state of health is.
Ketevan Gorgistani, if this was a TV drama, there's a new character who's been thrown in the mix, and that is the president's personal physician. He's a man by the name of Sean Conley. It turns out he's not a general practitioner, but an osteopath.
Yeah, and he's really the one that created this uncertainty about the health status of the president over the weekend, because he was the one who held that first press conference, and he threw into question the timeline of Donald Trump's testing positive, because he spoke about we're 72 hours into his illness, and that press conference came about 48 hours after we were were officially told that Donald Trump was tested positive. So people started questioning when Donald Trump actually knew that he was positive. And then there was that fumbling of the reporter's question about did Donald Trump get some supplemental oxygen, and when did he get it? He initially was only answering by saying that today he has not gotten oxygen. Today he has not gotten oxygen. And it turns out that on Friday, Donald Trump got twice supplemental oxygen, which puts into question how well he was doing at that day. He seemed to be doing better now, but this has really created a lot of mystery around the actual exact health status of the president. And Conley has come under heavy fire from a lot of people here in the US because everyone was expecting him, at least as the doctor, as the one who was speaking to the American public, to give us actual facts and clear updates about the president's health situation.
Dan Hazelwood, again, the French shouldn't be the ones to give lessons because we had two presidents who lied outrageously about their poor health when they were in office. Nonetheless, why is the president's personal physician an osteopath?
I don't know how the president selects his personal physician, and I think that there's a history of the president's keeping certain information public and private, and that's a long-standing turmoil. The press always wants to know more. The public usually sides with wanting more. But what you see right now is, again, the polarization in the middle of an electoral campaign where people are like, oh, well, if we're going to demand that we know this about President Trump, then we need to know this about candidate Biden. And you can just start to see how it starts to immediately get off into this other world again of the polarized political context.
So you have, as we were just saying, this new era of transparency we live in, Dan. News website Politico reporting this Monday that amid Trump's push to reopen schools last month, an assistant to a White House operative leaned on the Center for Disease Control to go easy on facts regarding children and COVID, with email exchanges between Paul Alexander, is his name, and the CDC. Making the facts fit the narrative you want to project. It's a serious charge leveled in that article, Dan Hazelwood.
Yeah, it's a very serious charge. And the question is, what is the nature of what was asked, what was actually done in all this process? There's a little bit of a problem, though, and we have to, one of the great problems in how everybody's communicated on is science and recommendations, even when you're meeting with your own physician on a course of action, often is a discussion of, do you want to be more aggressive? Do you want to be less aggressive? What was the nature of the requests? I'm sure Congress is going to hold hearings and investigate what those were. And then the problem is that in coming on top of that in the political campaign, you have Democrats, when people start talking about vaccines, you have a couple Democrats reflexively say, well, we're not going to trust vaccines from CDC. And so you have this trust the science, but we're not going to trust science if the other party is in control of an agency, which you can somewhat see the politics of that, but you're nervous about the public health consequences of those decisions. We just are really bad right now as a culture of having adult conversations about risk. And the COVID is a great example. What we thought we knew in February versus what we learned in March and April and now know differently has been an evolving process. And that's true because it's a new virus.
Yeah, but hang on, I'm talking about pressuring, Dan, I'm talking about pressuring the CDC to tweak its reports. The Center for Disease Control, which whose leaders were hailed as heroes in the fight against Ebola back in 2015.
No, and that's why I say we're going to have to see what that actually pressure was, what was said. There's clearly going to be an investigation on those details to find out what was the nature of that pressure. And if it was serious, it's going to become a greater problem going down the road.
Lyndon Haviland, how do you rebuild trust in public health institutions in the U.S.?
Well, first, I agree that we're horribly polarized at this moment, but we have seen political pressure brought on the FDA, and we've seen it brought on the CDC. We've seen it, HHS rewriting the guidance from the CDC in ways that do not conform to the science. So how do we rebuild trust? First, we stop talking over one another and we start really communicating facts in an understandable, compassionate, comprehensive way. The former speaker is correct. We have changed in our understanding of the virus. But when we are seeing surges where young people have gone back to university, where we are seeing surges because of Labor Day gatherings and perhaps super spreader events, we know enough that we need to go back to the basic science to say social distance, wash your hands, wear a mask, and don't expose your friends, loved ones, and community unnecessarily to risk. I think in the United States, we came to this false dichotomy of it's either the economy or it's public health. It's not. I can tell you honestly that a healthy economy is driven by healthy people. And so I think we also need to understand that in some cases all around the United States, we've seen public health professionals whose lives have been threatened. I mean, Dr. Fauci needs a security detail because he has talked about the reality of the science as we know it. That is unacceptable. How we rebuild trust is we start speaking with one voice and we start telling the truth.
All right, there's the public health aspect of it, as you mentioned. And again, there is the politics. Dan Hazelwood saying how every day brings its surprises. Let's look ahead on the calendar. This Wednesday is the vice presidential debate. And while Mike Pence has so far tested negative for COVID, Trump senior campaign manager Jason Miller was asked by NBC if the vice president was being reckless by showing up and sticking to his campaign schedule.
No, we're in a campaign. We have a month to go. We see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris out there campaigning. Certainly, they're not asking for a remote debate. Vice President Pence is following the debate for the vice presidential candidates on Wednesday. He'll be hitting the trail.
So onwards and upwards with the vice presidential debate, Jeffrey Hawkins?
I mean, I do hope that both candidates take every precaution. And obviously, Vice President Pence has been exposed to now several people that have subsequently tested positive. So we want to be very careful about that. But this debate has become so crucial. I mean, you know, I can say in a lot of elections, people don't pay that much attention to the vice presidential debate. In this situation with older candidates, presidential candidates, one of who is positive for coronavirus and is in the hospital at this very minute, all of a sudden, those people who are looking for the vice presidential slot become very important because either one of them, Kamala Harris or Vice President Pence, either one of them could be president very shortly. And so the American public is going to be taking a good look at those two, and I think they should. But I also think that they should be very, very careful about the health aspects of this and the public health aspects.
All right, Jeffrey Hawkins, many thanks. I want to thank Lyndon Haviland, Dan Hazelwood, and France 24 correspondent Ketevan Gorgestani for joining us. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Catalina Marchant.
Hello, Francois.
So every day brings its surprises, as we say.
We'll just be taking a look at the tornado of activity on social media following the announcement that Donald Trump has been hospitalized over COVID-19. Let's break it apart over what happened over the weekend. We can start by this video right here that Donald Trump posted on Saturday, giving an update on his condition and the treatment he is receiving. The online community was left wondering if the video was edited or not. This Twitter user saying all of his tweets say Twitter for iPhone. This one says Twitter Media Studio. Does that mean it was edited? Let's take a look at the alleged moment.
Look at the therapeutics, which I'm taking right now.
And there it is. But then the White House also posted a series of photos of him working at the hospital where he is staying. The online community quickly pointing out that maybe these photos seem to be staged. Here's the photo, one next to the other. Many claim that they are staged because some noticed that they were taken 10 minutes apart in different rooms where Trump seems to allegedly be signing a blank sheet of paper. So here are the different photos. You can see the different rooms. He's also wearing a different jacket, and a lot of Twitter users pointing to this moment. So all in all, the hashtag staged has been trending, where Twitter users...
Again, it's back to conspiracy theories.
Exactly. They point to this photo of this blank sheet of paper, but a lot of the social community is always quick to point out all these conspiracy theories over what was happening with Trump during the hospital or not. But here are some of the theories that were on the online community.
And both sides, again, on social media, energized.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, he does seem to be feeling better today, as there was a series of, as he tweeted a series of tweets, more than 18 tweets in less than 2 hours today.
What did you make of that, Jeffrey Hawkins?
Trump's tweeting? Well, I mean, I assume if Trump has a heartbeat, he's going to be tweeting, right? But just because it says it comes from him doesn't mean that it necessarily does. There are people in the White House that have access to that account, so who knows?
So you're a skeptic?
I'm, yes, a little skeptical, like most Americans, I think, at this point.
All right. Well, we'll know in the days to come. I want to thank you, Catalina. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate. All right.